Hey folks, Dr. Mike here for Renaissance Periodization. Training principle number 6, phase potentiation. The formal definition is quite brief, and then the real world definition is a little more lengthy. The formal definition looks something like this. Each phase of training should prepare the trainee for the most productive possible next phase of training, such that long-term improvement is maximized. Each phase potentiates the next, ideally. Potentiates means allows the full blooming of, improves the yield of. The real world definition is something like this. Some training adaptations help to promote other training adaptations, while the reverse may not be true. For example, having bigger muscles gives you more architecture to deploy in strength and makes you stronger. But being stronger with smaller muscles, not in any direct or indirect way really, helps you make your muscles bigger, it turns out. Size potentiates strength, but strength does not potentiate size. So, training phases should be ideally sequenced in a way that the current phase supports the most productive possible next phase, supports the most productive possible next phase, ideally in as much of a pattern that you can get where the net productivity support is the highest, so the overall rate of gain for all the phases sequenced together is the highest possible. And that quintessential key factor is the understanding that some phases are better positioned before others, but the reverse isn't true. So that if we just randomly train all the phases, it's not as good as a direct sequenced approach. There are two very interesting sub-principles of phase potentiation that help to fill in the holes for us about some of its complexities. The first sub-principle is that of adaptive decay. If we understand that one phase, the adaptations in that phase make the next phase go better, we're assuming that whatever it is that first phase built up is still around to make that next phase go better. For example, if you know that your wife is getting off work later that day, and you know that seeing flowers is going to make her happy because it's her birthday and you got her flowers. If you take the flowers, you go to the store in the morning very early, and right when she leaves for work, you come back from the store and you put the flowers and you just put them aside, they're going to wilt by the time she gets home. When she gets home tired and hungry, she's going to see the wilted flowers and she's going to be like, what the fuck is this? And you're like, this is what our relationship has come to. Wilted flowers. And I want you to understand that because also there's divorce papers in there, bitch. That's what she's going to get out of it. You don't want wilted flowers. You want fresh flowers. So you have to assume that if you buy flowers, there's a certain amount of time that they're going to take to literally decay. And that there is obviously, if you want to use the flowers to potentiate the next phase, which is ostensibly her being like, oh my God, you're so sweet, and you getting laid, then that is going to be something that you have to pay attention to as far as sequence and timing. You can't just assume that anything you build in training lasts forever. So adaptive decay is something you have to be aware of. Another thing you have to be aware of is the idea of training modality compatibility. You might not need decay to be a factor if one training's mere presence automatically maintains the other. So some attempt at decay prevention could be pointless. For example, if you're training for strength training conventionally maintains all of the muscle size you built in hypertrophy training. So the need to do extra hypertrophy work in high volumes during strength is pointless. Secondly, not only is it pointless, but training modality compatibility can be so poor that one of the phases, or so good and thus so interfering that one of the phases that you're using to maintain the other phase can interfere with that phase's actual benefit. For example, if you're using hypertrophy work in a strength phase to maintain hypertrophy, not only can it be that hypertrophy is so compatible that you're actually doing a really good thing by, first of all, hypertrophy and then strength training, you don't even have to strength train anymore. You don't even have to hypertrophy train anymore. You just strength train and you're good to go. But if you add in too much hypertrophy, the modality compatibility starts to be really highly interfering. The modalities are incompatible to train at the same time. The fatigue from hypertrophy training makes you suck at strength training. The fatigue from strength training makes you suck at hypertrophy training. And one starts to sap the other if they are co-presented. the way this lays out may be the choice between, do I put one phase here and one phase here? Do I, once I have this phase, need to have some maintenance form of this other phase? Or am I best taking it away altogether? Or do these phases not even align and there is no phase potentiated structure? Gets kind of complicated, but don't worry, it's really in real life often much more simple than that. So, phase potentiation, I got 5 take-home thought-provoking points. First, you can always just train for the thing you want directly, and there's no love lost there. You want power, right? Force times velocity, the ability to explode. Great. Train for power. Train for light weights for speed. It works. It'll get you more powerful. But galaxy brain time, for many human abilities, we understand that some systems and abilities underlie others. And that if you expand the ability of those systems and you improve those abilities, that thing we want in the end might be something that does even better for us. If you have a crush on a girl and she's interested in kissing you and you're interested in kissing her, brushing your teeth doesn't directly kiss her. You're not going to be brushing your teeth and be like, well, sure, doesn't shit like this does not feel like making out. As a matter of fact, it's a little uncomfortable. Yes, but if you have clean teeth, it makes the kissing go better. So if your first idea is, ooh, I'm going to go kiss this girl, do one of these. And you're like, one does not simply. Yes, you can just go do the thing and I'm sure it'll be great. But you can do this other thing that'll make that thing better. That phase potentiation discovery is kind of the birth of what we call modern periodization, or what is also called block periodization. That one block of training can make the next block go better. Thus, an intelligent approach to training, which you will now be summarily practicing, tries to figure out which subsystems underlie which abilities and main objectives of training, and training them to some optimal extent to get them buffered up and to make the objective end goal to be the highest possible. This approach, of course, takes into account not just the improvement of the systems, but the decay dynamics as well, and the interference effects as well. For example, yes, it is okay to just train for power, but power is built on strength, and strength is built on muscle size. So maybe you take some time to grow muscles, maybe you take some more time to make them stronger, and maybe then you, at the end, you have big, strong muscles. You teach them to be fast, and the end power that you get from that 3-phase approach versus if you just did power, 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 same time trained, your net power could be higher if you phasically structured that approach. If you look at the most powerful athletes, the ones that can generate the highest peak powers, they look like offensive linemen, football players, or super heavyweight Olympic weightlifters. Oh, why? There's a lot of muscle mass there. And they're really fucking strong. And thus, when you give them an implement to move as fast as possible, they move it faster than everybody else. They have the highest power output. But if you look at a shot putter, they sure as shit didn't get to 330 pounds putting a fucking 10-pound shot or whatever that thing weighs. That's not how you get jacked. It's sure as shit not how you get strong. It's how you get powerful. But power is something we're milking out of a system that has a given strength and a given size. And the bigger the strength and size, and the more time we take to develop them, oftentimes that pays yields in power that's nonlinear. It's not direct. A very good analogy that I've come up with before is if you ask a person, maybe a 4-year-old, barely a person, really, are children people? I'm kidding. I had a little joke. If you ask a kid, hey, how do you build the tallest building? Do you build it down or do you build it up? They go, up. What? That's stupid. Of course, up. And you're like, yeah, good. You passed the little kid IQ test. Good job. Get out of here, squirt. Get out of here. You go back to reading the newspaper as a proper father should. But if you ask a structural engineer how you build a skyscraper the tallest possible, do you build down or you build up? He's going to be like, is this a trick question? You're like, no. He goes, well, yeah, you build down first because you expand the base. If you get a really huge, awesome, deep, wide base, you have more structural elements to build even higher. If you just start going up, you maybe have a radio aspire or something that doesn't go high enough and needs bands to control it or cables to make it work. Also, you can't, there's no floors to it. It's just like a little ladder you climb up and freak out from acrophobia. So in the end, sometimes the stuff is not very intuitive. And in sport training and in client training, it can also be not so intuitive. So if your client or your athlete says, I want this, the goal might not be like, oh, simple, we'll just train that. That's specificity, but that's the tip of the spear. There's more to specificity underneath. And remember, in specificity, we said Specificity is when you train the thing, power, or the systems that underlie the thing, hypertrophy, strength. Now that is second level thinking. So in addition to that, decay, remember, is an issue as well. How do we attend to it? During the phases, we can attend to it by integrating multiple different kinds of training. People asked, what's better, block periodization, where you have dedicated phases of only one thing at a time, or conjugate/concurrent periodization, where you have a mix of all of them? The answer is modern periodization, which has block elements and concurrent elements, but they're prioritized differently. So for example, in power training, you want to have a hypertrophy phase that you do first, but you might do some power training a little bit just to keep athletic and keep that movement going and know that you're still practicing the movement patterns, still being in touch with your explosiveness. Not a ton, just a little bit. Then you enter your strength phase. You might have to say, okay, what's the adaptive decay and modality alignment like? I'm going to still do a little bit of power during that phase. I'm going to do a little bit of hypertrophy training during that phase, but not a ton. Mostly it's strength training. And then when you get to the power phase, you make a really big revelation. Strength training is something you should still be doing plenty of in the power phase because that's that core thing that keeps it going. And then you do mostly power training, a bit of strength training, but zero hypertrophy training. Why? Two things, and both of them are each one of the actual sub-principles. Thing number one is the strength training keeps your muscle size on. You don't actually have to do hypertrophy training. As a matter of fact, in that middle block, you did a little bit of hypertrophy training, but really you didn't have to. There, you don't do any. Why? Because first of all, you don't need to, but second of all, an even more compelling reason, hypertrophy training develops fatigue and teaches your nervous system to move slowly. And you need to teach it to move quickly for power. And fatigue is the always everywhere number one killer of power output. You have to be fresh to produce high powers. So now you have some strength work, a lot of power work, and zero hypertrophy work in that last phase. That is how you put together a modern periodization, phase potentiated structure. It accounts for all the variables, and it doesn't just say, here you train this, here you train that. It's not that simple. It's a little bit more complex, but nonetheless tractable. All right, folks. See you next time for the last video in this lecture series, individualization. See you then.